Subscribe to Mac Studios on YouTube. Enjoy the show.
Hi everybody, this is The Rundown, and in today's episode, we sit down with Dr. Tran and Dr. Stockton to learn more about the rise of hate crimes within the AAPI community. In this episode, you'll be hearing us talk about the psychological, sociological, and historical components that have made this into a very complicated issue. But we hope that by the end of today's episode, you'll learn something new and you'll be encouraged to learn more about the AAPI community and what we can do to help stop this problem. One thing that we realize is that not a lot of people really know who AAPI includes and what role they've had in American history.
So when we're talking about Asian Americans, so Asian Americans are those who live in America, who identify as being part American as well. So Asian Americans could be anything such as Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Lao, Cambodian, Philippine. So there's a variety of people in AAPI. So it's not limited to what I'm actually just talking about just here, which are the usually more common ones, but in regards to the numbers of populations. But, the community itself is pretty wide.
The presence of Asian Americans in the U.S. can be seen as early as the mid-1800s during the gold rush, when many Asian Americans came but weren't treated equally and seen as disposable, and they were usually given the toughest jobs and the deadliest jobs. The truth is that Asian Americans are an incredibly important part of American history, but a lot of people don't know about it, and they tend to be victims of scapegoating and fear-mongering.
One of the things that you can think about that boils down with hate is that the fear of the unknown, right? And you don't really know precisely about who they are or what they embody. But because of that, the fear of the unknown, people may, for instance, act on it. And that's the reason why that when we're talking about the idea of the, more so about why Asian hate is actually happening, what the psychological kind of explanation or underpinnings of that. We talk about, certain things such as, what kind of languages that are possibly attached to that, right? Such as certain rhetorics that we've heard before, such as China virus. By attaching words such as the China virus, that already makes that, particular group of individuals, such as Asian Americans, seem more foreign, right? They're kind of perceived much more as foreigners. And because they're perceived much more as foreigners, it's much more easy to then act upon that hate or being hostile, among a group that is actually foreign to us.
In fact, most of this fear comes from people simply not knowing enough about the culture and letting their preconceived notions justify their prejudices.
Yeah, one of the things I mentioned to my students, frequently is when surveys are taken, say in the U.S., how worried are people about the Chinese, or how suspicious are Americans of the Chinese government, right? Or kind of what's our perception of the Chinese government? And the perception is very negative, all right? But then there's separate questions, that the same survey, that say, well, what's your opinion of people from China? And so far, the average American perceives someone from China or someone from China in the U.S. or Asian, whatever, as much more positive than they do the foreign government. And so as U.S.-China tensions rise, it's okay to have beef with the ruling party in China, as long as we can differentiate between that power structure and the folks who have migrated to the U.S. for a better life. They have chosen to come here to get away from that. And so they need our sympathy, our love, our compassion. And so that part of the equation is something everyone in the U.S. of all ethnicities, religions, linguistic groups, whatever, that's in our power.
So this idea is that, when you come to an Asian person, you're like, oh, where are you from? Right. And so, as an Asian American, I've heard this many, many times before. Where are you from? And we would say, oh, I'm from San Jose, California. And they would say, no, where are you really from? And so they don't get the idea that, we were, for instance, a lot of Asian Americans are born and bred in America. We identify being American just as much as our, cultural heritage, such as our parents. And so, I think that's the idea here, is that a lot of people don't perceive us as being true Americans. And again, that is attached to the idea of, well, there are foreigners. And that's the reason why when you hear this kind of hate or racial slurs that comes out of, directed towards Asian Americans, you typically hear, well, go back where you come from, or go back to your country, and so on and so forth, because of the idea that, they perceive them as foreigners and not necessarily true Americans.
The first step towards correcting this issue is first accepting that we just simply haven't done enough to teach ourselves about Asian American culture and Asian American history.
There are many Asian Americans in this country that are the third or fourth generation American born. And their connection with whatever the home country was might be as superficial as anyone else not from that country. I mean, there's a blood connection. There's there's that point of origin, but this kind of suspicion that people from the other group has that, oh, well, your loyalties are really with the where you're from, and it's like, what, 4 generations ago. And so again, that's just stop and think about this absolutely idiotic things we say or the way we think that really it calls for a lot better reflection and education.
Willingly educating ourselves and engaging in dialogue about topics that may not even impact us directly is the biggest asset we have towards fixing this problem.
Programs that try to bring people from diverse and beautiful populations together to realize our common humanity. I mean, it's a place like the University of St. Thomas, where we talk about, the dignity of the human person. We're a universal family. We might be distant cousins, but we should all treat each other with love and respect and dignity, and walk along that path together. So we educate in the classroom, we educate our students about people, places, times, events, things on there. In our places of worship, we need to hear lessons of love and community. And then at home, as parents, we need to have difficult conversations with our kids.
I am a firm believer that knowledge is power. And, just talking about this class that I'm teaching right now, which is race and diversity, that was actually born from one of you all, a USD student. Actually, I believe the president of the Black Student Union, she actually sent out an email last year, after, what happened to George Floyd, right? Talking about there needs to be more classes that's teaching about, the diversity and races, right? And so as a department, psychology department, we thought about this a lot, right? We understand that this is a really important issue right now. And so that's the reason why we created this class, Race and Diversity, so that we can actually talk to our students about what are all the different races in, the United States. Let's dive into their history, but not only that, talk about the psychological underpinnings about these type of stereotypes, prejudice, and discriminations that could actually be indications of what these people, these races actually face. And also talking about diversity and celebrating diversity, right? So that was just one class. This is just one class, but it gives me hope that there are students who are interested in wanting to create these type of classes or offer these type of classes, so they can learn more about other people that maybe that they don't really know too well about. So definitely educating yourself, doing your research, reading more, and take the time out to get to know your neighbors, right? Someone who you don't identify with, maybe with your own skin color or your gender or your religion, right? Get to know someone else, because through that you might learn their story, right? And when you learn their story, you can actually understand a little bit more about them. And it's a two-way street. They can learn more about you, right? And so we can actually minimize the amount of stereotypes that may be attached to certain type of groups. And the hopes there is that then we can actually lower the amount of prejudice and discrimination that would then lead into hate among a particular type of group.
Thanks for watching the show. Share this with all your friends and family and start a conversation. Subscribe to Max Studios if you haven't done so already, and turn on notifications for similar and other types of content. If you want to write to us, email us at maxstudios@stthom.edu. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Max Studios UST. This show is produced by Max Studios at the University of St. Thomas.